Magnetic people don't fight for the room. They let the room settle around their calm. We've all met someone who walks into a space and everything shifts. Conversations pause, attention gravitates, energy realigns. It's not about being loud or domineering. It's something subtler, deeper, almost invisible. That charming aura is something we call charisma. And what if I told you that charisma isn't a gift you're born with, but a language you can learn? Today, we're diving into 52 psychology-backed techniques that will transform how you show up in any room, any conversation, any moment. These aren't manipulative tricks. They're the hidden architecture of human connection, the neural patterns that make someone's presence unforgettable. Before we begin, I'm curious, where in the world are you tuning in from right now? Drop your location in the comments below. And what time is it where you are? Are you watching this with your morning coffee or winding down before bed? Let me know. I love seeing this global community come together. Let's begin. Trick 1. The threshold effect. Let's start at the very beginning. Before you even speak. Before you even make eye contact. Right there, at the threshold. The doorway. The entrance. That liminal space between where you were and where you're going. Here's what's happening in that moment. Mirror neurons. These remarkable cells in the brain that fire both when we act and when we observe someone else acting. They're the biological foundation of empathy, of understanding, of connection. And they activate most intensely in the first 3 seconds of seeing someone new. 3 seconds, not 3 minutes, not even 30 seconds. 3. In that span of time, shorter than this sentence, the brain creates what we might call a neural snapshot, a first draft of who you are. And here's the thing about first drafts. They're hard to revise. This is confirmation bias at its root. The brain, trying to conserve energy, takes that early data and uses it as a lens for everything that follows. If the first 3 seconds register calm, groundedness, warmth, then everything you do afterward gets interpreted through that lens. But if those first seconds register anxiety, uncertainty, or performance, well, you're working uphill from there. So the technique isn't about performing confidence. It's about arriving already settled. Before you enter any space, a party, a meeting, a coffee shop, someone's home, pause. Literally pause. Outside the door if you can. Take one full breath. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Feel your feet on the ground. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw soften. What you're doing is resetting your nervous system. You're telling your body, we're not in danger. We're not performing. We're just here. Then you open the door, and you walk in as if you've already been welcomed. Not arrogantly, just calmly, as if this space already knows you, as if you already belong. That's the threshold effect, and it shapes everything that follows. Trick 2. The proprioceptive anchor. Now you're inside. You're in the space. And here's what most people don't realize. Your body is speaking before your mouth opens. Every microexpression, every tiny postural adjustment, every muscle tension pattern, all of it is broadcasting your internal state. This is proprioception, your brain's sense of where your body is in space. And here's the fascinating part. Proprioceptive signals, these messages from your muscles and joints about tension and position, they feed directly into the limbic system. That's your emotional brain. The part that feels before it thinks. So when you're tense, when you're holding stress in your shoulders or clenching your jaw or shifting your weight nervously, that information goes straight to your emotional centers. And it shows up in your face, in your gestures, in the subtle energy you project. And people read it, not consciously, but they read it. The technique here is what I call grounding. And it's beautifully simple. Before you speak, before you engage, take a moment to feel your feet on the ground. Actually feel them. The pressure, the temperature, the solidity of the floor beneath you. This isn't metaphorical. This is literal sensory awareness. What happens when you do this? You slow down. And slowness, genuine, unhurried slowness, reads as power. It reads as someone who doesn't need to rush. Someone who has time. Someone who owns their space. Your body speaks first, and it never lies. But you can teach it to speak quietly, with weight. That's the proprioceptive anchor. Physical awareness that translates into emotional presence. Trick 3. the asymmetric smile. Let's talk about smiling. Because there's a difference between a smile and a smile. Scientists distinguish between what they call a social smile and a Duchenne smile, named after the French neurologist who first studied facial expressions. A social smile uses only the zygomatic major muscle, the one that pulls your mouth up. It's the smile you give the cashier, the smile you give at the office, the performed smile. But a Duchenne smile? That engages additional muscles, the orbicularis oculi, the ones around your eyes. These muscles crinkle the corners of your eyes. They create what we call crow's feet. And here's the crucial part. You cannot voluntarily control these muscles. They only activate during genuine positive emotion, which means people can tell. Not consciously, necessarily, but subconsciously. The brain detects the difference between a performed smile and a real one. And a performed smile? It creates distance. It says, I'm being polite, but I'm not really here. But there's another element that signals authenticity, asymmetry. When you genuinely feel warmth or happiness or connection, your smile doesn't appear perfectly symmetrically. It starts on one side, slightly before the other. There's a temporal delay, a slight unevenness. And that imperfection, that's what reads as real. A perfect smile is a mask. A slight, uneven curve, that's a crack in the armor. And people trust cracks. So here's the technique. When you smile, let it start slow. From one side. Don't force it into symmetry. Let it spread like ink in water. Natural, uneven, genuine. Let your smile be imperfect. That imperfection is what makes it trustworthy. Trick 4. The pupillary response loop. Now we go deeper, literally, into the eyes. Your pupils, those black centers, they dilate and contract automatically, controlled by your autonomic nervous system. And they dilate for 3 primary reasons: low light, attraction, and arousal. Not sexual arousal necessarily, but any kind of heightened interest or engagement. When you're genuinely interested in someone, when you're attracted to them or fascinated by what they're saying, your pupils dilate. It's involuntary. And here's the remarkable part. Humans subconsciously mirror this. When you notice someone's pupils dilating, and this is subtle, you need decent lighting and close proximity. Your own nervous system responds. It's a feedback loop. Their dilation triggers yours, which triggers theirs, which deepens the entire interaction. This is the biological basis of what we call chemistry. That sense that someone is into the conversation. That mutual engagement that makes time disappear. The technique isn't to stare. That would be strange. It's simply to notice. In close conversation, let your attention include the darkness at the center of their eyes. Not with intensity, just with awareness. Eyes don't just see, they signal. And when you learn to read the signals, conversations become dances. You're not just exchanging words. You're exchanging physiological states. Nervous systems communicating directly. That's the pupillary response loop. The invisible language of engagement. Trick 5. The temporal mismatch technique. Here's something counterintuitive. The speed of your response affects how much it's trusted. When someone asks you a question and you answer immediately, instantly, without pause, a part of their brain registers skepticism. Why? Because the anterior cingulate cortex, a region involved in evaluating information and detecting conflict, interprets instant responses as potentially scripted, pre-programmed, not actually considered. But when there's a slight delay, not a long, awkward pause, just a beat, the brain interprets this differently. It says, this person is actually thinking about what I asked. They're considering me, not performing for me. This is the temporal mismatch technique. The intentional use of pause to signal thoughtfulness. When someone asks you something, anything, let a breath pass. Just one. Feel the question land. Let there be a moment of silence between their words and yours. Then answer. That's silence. That's not hesitation. That's respect. It says, your question mattered enough for me to actually think about it. And in a world where everyone is rushing to respond, to fill every gap, to keep the conversation moving, that pause becomes a gift. It becomes presence. Trick 6. The kinesthetic preloading. Before we go further, let's talk about what happens before you even arrive. The preparation. The invisible work that shapes how you show up. Your nervous system exists in one of two primary states: sympathetic activation, the fight or flight response, or parasympathetic activation, the rest and digest state. And here's what most people don't realize. You can influence which state you're in through something beautifully simple: touch. Specifically, slow, gentle self-touch. The vagus nerve, the primary nerve of the parasympathetic system, responds to gentle tactile stimulation. When you touch yourself slowly, with care, like you would comfort someone you love, it sends a signal to your nervous system: we're safe. We can relax. This reduces cortisol, your primary stress hormone, and it primes oxytocin release, the hormone associated with bonding and connection. The result? Your nonverbals become more fluid. Your voice becomes more resonant. Your entire presence settles. Before you meet them, meet yourself. In the moments before entering a social space, press your thumb gently into your opposite palm, or touch your own wrist, slowly, with the same tenderness you'd use to comfort a child or soothe a friend. It's a reset button for your nervous system. And when your system is calm, everything else, your words, your gestures, your energy, flows from that calm. That's kinesthetic preloading, self-soothing as social preparation. Trick 7. The peripheral vision hold. Let's return to eye contact. Because there's a paradox here. Direct eye contact is powerful. It signals attention, confidence, engagement. But there's a threshold. Too much direct gaze, especially intense, unbroken eye contact, activates the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. Sustained, direct gaze from another person could signal aggression, a challenge, a threat. The amygdala evolved to treat it with caution. So while eye contact creates connection, too much creates tension. The trick is finding the balance. And that balance is what I call peripheral vision hold. Instead of focusing intensely on their eyes, boring into them, piercing them, soften your gaze. Let it expand. Take in their whole face, their cheekbones, their hairline, the space around them. You're still looking at them, but you're not staring through them. This is soft focus, and it changes everything. People feel seen without feeling scrutinized. They feel witnessed without feeling examined. And that distinction, that's the difference between intensity and warmth. Look at them, yes, but don't pierce them. Let your gaze soften until you see their whole face, not just their eyes. In conversation, imagine your vision expanding, taking them in entirely, not just targeting their gaze. This shifts your energy from intense to warm, from challenging to inviting, from powerful to magnetic. Trick 8. The micro-exit strategy. Let's talk about a paradox. The paradox of freedom. When you feel trapped in a social situation, when you feel like you can't leave, like you're obligated to stay, like escape isn't an option, your stress hormones spike. Cortisol rises. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for complex thinking and genuine engagement, starts to shut down as your survival brain takes over. You stop truly listening. You start monitoring, looking for threats, planning your escape. Even if you look engaged on the outside, inside you're in survival mode. But here's the paradox. The moment you know you can leave is the moment you can finally stay. Really stay? The moment you give yourself permission to exit, the moment you locate the doors, acknowledge your freedom, remind your nervous system that you're here by choice, is the moment your stress response deactivates. And when you're not trapped, you relax. When you relax, you listen. When you listen, you become magnetic. This is the micro-exit strategy. In any social setting, within the first minute, locate the exits. Not to plan your escape, but to remind your body that escape is possible. That you're here because you choose to be, not because you have to be. That sense of agency, that internal freedom, it changes everything. Your shoulders drop. Your breath deepens. You stop performing and start experiencing. And people feel that shift. They feel that you're genuinely present, not just going through the motions. Trick 9. The semantic void technique. Think about the last time someone told you something and then paused, mid-sentence, left the thought hanging there, incomplete. What did you do? You probably leaned in. Your brain probably tried to finish their thought. You might have even said something like, "And then what?" Or, "You mean?" That's not an accident. That's neuroscience. There's something called the Zygarnik effect, named after a Russian psychologist who noticed that waiters could remember incomplete orders better than completed ones. The brain hates open loops. Incomplete information creates a kind of cognitive tension, and that tension demands resolution. The brain literally cannot rest until the gap is filled. And here's the beautiful part. When someone fills that gap, when they complete your thought or ask you to continue, they're not just listening anymore. They're co-creating. And when people co-create meaning with you, they become invested. Investment creates connection. This is the semantic void technique. The intentional use of incompleteness to activate engagement. Don't finish every thought. Let some sentences trail off. Mid-idea, pause. Look away slightly, like you're considering something. Let the silence hang there, pregnant with possibility. Watch what happens. They'll lean in. They'll ask. They'll complete your sentence. They'll fill the void. And in that filling, something shifts. The conversation stops being one person talking to another. It becomes something you're building together. Don't finish every thought. Let some sentences trail off and watch how they lean in to complete them. Trick 10, the prosodic mirror. Now let's talk about rhythm. Because every person speaks with a unique tempo, a specific musicality. Some people talk fast, their words tumbling over each other like water. Others speak slowly, with long pauses between thoughts. Some have a rising inflection at the end of sentences. Others drop their pitch. This is prosody, the melody of speech. And here's what most people don't realize. Your brain is constantly detecting these rhythmic patterns. The superior temporal gyrus, a region involved in processing sound, is exquisitely sensitive to rhythm and tempo. And when someone matches your rhythm, when they speak at your pace, pause when you pause, rise and fall with your inflection, something remarkable happens. Neural synchrony. Your brainwaves literally begin to align. The boundary between me and you starts to soften. This is called interpersonal entrainment. It's why you feel instantly comfortable with some people and not others. It's why certain conversations feel effortless. The rhythms match. The music aligns. The technique here is subtle. You're not consciously mimicking. You're listening not just to their words, but to their music, the tempo, the pauses, the pitch patterns. And then, naturally, almost unconsciously, you begin to match it. If they speak slowly, you slow down. If they speak in rapid bursts of enthusiasm, you mirror that energy. Not exactly. You're a half step behind, like a musical echo. Just enough that their nervous system registers. This person is on my frequency. Listen not to their words, but to their music. Then play the same melody, just a half step behind. When your speech patterns align, sameness breeds safety. And safety is the foundation of every deep connection. Trick 11, the silence expansion. Most people are terrified of silence. In a conversation, when those first 2 or 3 seconds of quiet arrive, the anxiety spikes. Fill it. Say something. Anything. Don't let the silence become awkward. But here's what that fear misses. Silence isn't empty. It's full. Full of processing, of feeling, of the deepening that only happens when words stop. The typical social norm is to fill silence within 1 to 2 seconds. Any longer, and people start to feel uncomfortable. But what if you extended it? Not indefinitely. Not to the point of strangeness. Just to 3, 4, 5 seconds. Long enough that the silence becomes a presence of its own. This is silence expansion. And it's one of the most powerful techniques in the entire architecture of magnetic listening. When you can hold silence, when you can sit comfortably in those empty spaces without rushing to fill them, you signal something profound, internal security. Most people fear silence because they fear social rejection. The quiet feels like disapproval, like disconnection. But when you're comfortable there, when you can rest in the emptiness, it communicates. I don't need to perform. I'm secure enough to just be. And here's the gift. Your comfort gives others permission. Permission to think. Permission to feel. Permission to find their own words instead of saying the first thing that comes to mind. After they finish speaking, count to 3 before responding. Slowly. 1, 2, 3. Let the silence sit. Don't rush to fill it. Watch what happens. Often, they'll continue. They'll go deeper. Because the silence created space for something truer to emerge. Silence isn't empty. It's full. And the person who can hold it holds the room. That's intimacy, not words. Silence, shared. Trick 12. The semantic echo. Here's a simple technique that feels almost too simple to work. But it does. Powerfully. When someone says something, especially something real, something vulnerable, something important, don't respond with your own thoughts. Don't analyze. Don't advise. Don't relate it to your experience. Just repeat the last 1 to 3 words they said, with a questioning tone, gently, like you're holding those words up to the light. This is the semantic echo. Why does this work? Because when you hear your own words reflected back to you, something activates in your brain. Broca's area and Wernicke's area, the language centers, light up. But more than that, you feel heard. Not just listened to. Heard. There's a difference. When you echo someone's words, you're doing 2 things simultaneously. First, you're validating that what they said mattered enough to repeat. Second, you're inviting them to expand. The questioning tone, the slight upward inflection, creates an opening. It says, tell me more about that. Go deeper. And they do. Almost always they do. They say, I've been feeling disconnected lately. And instead of saying, oh, I know what you mean, or disconnected from what, or have you tried? You simply say softly, disconnected? Then you wait. You let the word hang there. And they'll explain. They'll go into territory they hadn't planned to explore. Because you didn't redirect the conversation. You deepened it. You stayed with their exact words, their exact feeling, and invited them to unfold it. When they say something real, don't respond. Echo. Let their words hang in the air, and they'll explain themselves into depth. People feel profoundly heard. And being heard is the root of all charisma. Trick 13. The somatic nod. Let's talk about nodding. Because most people nod unconsciously, constantly, while someone is speaking. Little bobblehead movements that say, yes, I'm listening, keep going. But there's a more powerful way to nod. Wait until they finish their sentence. Completely finish. Let their words land. Hold stillness while they speak. Genuinely still, not frozen, just quiet. And then, after they finish, after that brief moment of completion, give one slow, deliberate nod. This is the somatic nod. Why does this work? Because of how the vestibular system, your inner ear, your sense of balance and movement, connects to emotional processing. When you nod, you're not just moving your head. You're activating neural pathways connected to agreement, to reward, to satisfaction. But if you're nodding constantly while they speak, it becomes noise. It's like constantly saying, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. It blurs into background. It loses meaning. But one nod, at the end, after their thought has completed, that's different. That nod says, I received this. Your words landed. I'm sealing this moment of understanding like an agreement. It's a physiological feedback loop. Your nod activates something in their nervous system. A sense of completion, of being understood, of matching. Don't nod while they speak. Wait. Let their words finish. Then, just once, nod. Like you're sealing an agreement. They feel it. Maybe not consciously, but they feel their words landed. And that feeling? That's what keeps them opening up to you. Trick 14. The narrative bridging. When someone tells you a personal story, a struggle, a victory, a moment of confusion or pain, there's a natural impulse to relate. To say, oh, that reminds me of when I, or the same thing happened to me. And sometimes that's fine. But there's something more powerful you can do. Something that makes them feel seen at a level most people never reach. Connect their story not to your story, but to a universal human theme. Find the myth inside their personal narrative. Name the archetype. This is narrative bridging. Humans process personal narratives through archetypal structures. Joseph Campbell spent his life mapping these patterns. The hero's journey, the descent into darkness, the return with wisdom. These aren't just literary devices. They're how our brains make meaning of experience. When you take someone's specific struggle and show them the universal pattern inside it, you're not diminishing their experience. You're elevating it. You're saying, this thing you're going through, it's not small. It's not isolated. It's part of the oldest story humans have ever told. They share a struggle, maybe about leaving a job, or ending a relationship, or facing a fear. And instead of sharing your similar story, you say something like, "That's the oldest story, isn't it? The hero who doesn't know they're strong yet." Then you stop. You don't elaborate. You just name it. And in that naming, they see themselves differently. Not as someone who's confused or weak, but as someone in the middle of a story that has meaning, that has arc, that has possibility. When they tell you a story, don't share yours. Find the myth inside theirs. Name it. You're not just listening. You're seeing the larger pattern. And when someone feels seen at that level, at the level of soul, of meaning, of archetype, that's when real connection happens. Trick 15. The cognitive load reduction. Charisma is often thought of as addition, adding charm, adding wit, adding energy. But sometimes the most charismatic thing you can do is subtract. Remove friction. Make things easier. This is cognitive load reduction. The prefrontal cortex, that part of your brain responsible for decision-making, planning, and self-control, has limited capacity. It fatigues. And when it's overloaded with decisions, with ambiguity, with too many options, something called ego depletion sets in. People become irritable, paralyzed, exhausted. But when you reduce that load, when you simplify a decision, remove ambiguity, or provide clarity when others are drowning in options, you trigger dopamine release. The brain experiences relief, and relief feels like gratitude. People gravitate toward those who make life easier, not harder. In a group setting, if no one can decide where to eat, everyone's looking at each other, throwing out options, saying, "I don't care, whatever you want." Be the person who decides. Not dominantly, not aggressively, just clearly. "Let's go to that place on 5th Street. They have something for everyone." The decision is made. The paralysis ends. And everyone feels a little lighter. Charisma is removing friction. When they're uncertain, be certain. When they're overwhelmed, simplify. You become the person who makes things easier. And people remember that. They seek it out. They gravitate toward it. Trick 16. The affective labeling. Here's something that sounds almost too simple to be powerful, but the research is unequivocal. When you name someone's emotion before they do, something extraordinary happens in their brain. This is called affect labeling. And studies by neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman have shown that putting feelings into words, literally labeling an emotion, activates the medial prefrontal cortex and downregulates the amygdala. Translation: naming the feeling reduces its intensity. The emotion doesn't disappear, but it becomes more manageable. But here's the social magic. When you name their emotion before they do, you become the person who understands them before they understand themselves. They're agitated, tense. Maybe their voice is tight, their movements sharp. They haven't said what's wrong. Maybe they don't even know yet. But you see it. You feel it. And gently, without accusation, you name it. "You seem frustrated." Not at me, just at the situation. Then you wait. You don't explain. You don't fix. You just name it and create space. What happens next is usually profound. Their shoulders drop. They exhale. And often, they say, "Yes, exactly," because you gave them the word they were searching for. You made the invisible visible. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say what they're feeling before they find the words. That's not mind reading. That's attentiveness. That's emotional intelligence. That's the kind of listening that people never forget. Trick 17. The question inversion. Now, let's talk about a technique that feels counterintuitive at first, but creates some of the deepest conversations you'll ever have. When someone asks you a question, especially a question seeking advice or perspective, there's a natural impulse to answer, to give your opinion, to solve their problem. But sometimes, the most powerful response is to invert the question, to turn it back to them, not deflectively, not to avoid answering, but generatively, to activate their own wisdom. This is the Socratic method, refined for connection rather than philosophical inquiry. "What should I do?" they ask. And instead of telling them what you think, you respond. "If you trusted yourself completely right now, what would you do?" Then silence. Let the question sit. Let them wrestle with it. What you're doing is activating deeper self-reflection. People remember insights they generate far more powerfully than insights given to them. When you tell them what to do, they might follow your advice. But when they discover their own answer, with you as the mirror, they own it completely. You become a mirror that helps them see themselves more clearly. They ask you what you think. Sometimes the answer is, "What do you think?" Not to avoid, but to deepen. This requires trust. Trust that they have wisdom inside them. Trust that your role isn't to be the expert, but to be the reflective surface that shows them what they already know. And when you offer that trust, they feel it. They rise to it. And they remember you as the person who believed they had the answer all along. Trick 18. The somatic baseline reset. Here's something most people never learn. You have a body at rest, a neutral state, a home frequency that's uniquely yours. But most of us never find it. We live in reactive mode. Someone says something, and our shoulders tense. We walk into a stressful situation, and our jaw clenches. We spend our entire lives responding to external stimuli, our bodies constantly adjusting, compensating, bracing. And here's what happens. Those reactive patterns become your baseline. Tension becomes normal. And when tension is your normal, people feel it. Even when you think you're relaxed, your micro-expressions, those tiny, involuntary facial movements, betray your internal state. This is where the somatic baseline reset comes in. There's something in your brain called the default mode network. It's a collection of brain regions that activate when you're not focused on the outside world, when you're just being. And this network runs background emotional patterns, old tensions, habitual holdings, the accumulated stress of years. But you can reset it. Every morning, before the day touches you, stand still, completely still, and scan your body. Notice where you hold tension, your shoulders, your jaw, your lower back. Don't judge it. Just notice it. Then breathe into it. Slowly, imagine your breath traveling to that exact spot. And as you exhale, let it release. Not forcefully. Just let it go. Do this for 3 minutes. Every morning. Until you find your neutral. Your 0 point. The body state that's yours when nothing is demanding something from you. This becomes your baseline. And throughout the day, you can return to it. Before a meeting. Before a difficult conversation. Before walking into any space where you need to be present. You have a body at rest. Learn it. Return to it. It's your home frequency. People trust consistency. And when your baseline is calm, when you're not constantly reacting, adjusting, bracing, you never seem rattled. No matter what happens, you return to center. And that centeredness? That's magnetic. Trick 19. The status neutrality. Watch any social interaction closely, and you'll see it, the status game. Someone says something impressive, and another person tries to top it. Someone makes a joke at someone else's expense. Someone defers, apologizes, shrinks. Dominance and submission. High status and low status. It's primate social behavior, an algorithm that's been running in our species for millions of years. But here's the thing, you don't have to play. This is status neutrality. And it's one of the most powerful positions you can occupy. When someone tries to dominate, when they one-up you, when they try to establish superiority, the typical response is either to compete back or to submit, to rise to the challenge or to back down. But both of those responses keep you in the game. Both acknowledge that the game matters. What if you simply opted out? Someone tries to one-up you. They tell a story that's bigger, better, more impressive than yours. And instead of competing, instead of saying, "Oh yeah? Well, let me tell you about the time you just smile, slightly, and say nothing. Or you say something genuinely appreciative. That's impressive. And mean it. You're not competing. You're not conceding. You're standing in a third place. A place where status doesn't matter. And here's what happens. It confuses the algorithm. The brain expects one of two responses, dominance or submission. When you give neither, you become unreadable. And the brain interprets unreadable as complexity, as depth. Don't rise to dominance. Don't shrink into submission. Stand in a third place where status doesn't matter. This isn't about being passive. It's about being secure. So secure that you don't need to prove anything. So grounded that the game simply doesn't touch you. And people feel that. They're drawn to it. Because in a world where everyone is scrambling for status, the person who doesn't need it, that person has power. Trick 20. The micro-vulnerability. Perfection is a fortress. It keeps people out. It creates distance, not connection. But a crack in the armor? That's where intimacy lives. This is the micro-vulnerability technique. And it's based on something psychologists call the pratfall effect. The research is fascinating. When a highly competent person makes a small mistake, spills their coffee, admits to a minor flaw, their likability increases. But when an incompetent person makes the same mistake, their likability decreases. The flaw humanizes the competent person. It makes them approachable without diminishing respect. But here's the key. It has to be micro, small, harmless, not a wound you're exposing, not deep trauma or serious failure, just a crack, a small imperfection that says, I'm human. In conversation, after you've established competence, after people see that you're capable and together, admit something small, something that doesn't matter but shows you're not perfect. I still can't parallel park. It's absurd. Then you laugh lightly and move on. You don't dwell on it. You don't make it a story. You just acknowledge it and continue. What this does is create permission. If you, someone who seems capable and confident, can admit imperfection without shame, then they can too. You've made it safe to be real. Let them see one small thing you're not good at. Not a wound, just a crack. It makes everything else real. Perfection creates distance. A small crack creates intimacy. And intimacy is the soil where charisma grows. Trick 21. The kinetic stillness. Most people move constantly, fidgeting, adjusting, shifting weight, touching their face, playing with their hair. Small, unconscious movements driven by nervous energy. And every movement broadcasts something. I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncertain. I'm anxious. But stillness? Stillness broadcasts something entirely different. This is kinetic stillness. And it's one of the most powerful nonverbal techniques you can master. Your brain has motion detection systems, areas like V5 and MT in the visual cortex that are constantly scanning for movement. It's an evolutionary adaptation. Movement could mean threat, or opportunity, or prey. So the brain prioritizes it. But when someone is still, genuinely still, not frozen but settled, those motion detection systems have nothing to track. And something strange happens. Attention gets pulled inward, not outward to the movement, but inward to the person, to their presence, to their words. When you stop moving, people stop scanning. They listen. While speaking, plant your feet. Feel them rooted to the ground. Let your hands rest, maybe clasped gently, maybe at your sides. Resist the urge to fidget, to gesture constantly, to fill space with motion. Become the still point in a moving room. This doesn't mean rigidity. You can still move with intention, a deliberate gesture to emphasize a point. But the movement is intentional, not reactive. And between movements, you return to stillness. Move less. Not because you're frozen, because you're already where you need to be. Stillness signals internal coherence. It says, I'm not scattered. I'm not anxious. I'm here, fully, and I don't need to prove it through motion. And that stillness? It creates a vacuum, a gravitational pull. People lean toward it. Trick 22. The temporal confidence. Watch someone with real power move through the world, and you'll notice something. They're never in a hurry. They walk slowly. They speak with pauses. They move through time as if they have an infinite supply of it. This is temporal confidence, and it's rooted in evolutionary psychology. Throughout human history, those with resources, food, safety, status, didn't need to rush. Rushing signaled scarcity, desperation. If you're hurrying, it means something is chasing you, or something might run out. But if you're unhurried, if you move through the world with calm, deliberate pacing, that signals abundance. It says, I have time. I have resources. I'm not worried about running out. And the human brain still reads these signals. Slowness is a status signal, not laziness, slowness. There's a difference. The technique is simple but requires practice. Walk 10% slower than your instinct tells you to. Not a crawl. Not dramatically slow. Just 10%. Let each step be deliberate. Speak with pauses. Not the anxious kind, where you're searching for words, but the confident kind, where you're letting each thought land before moving to the next. Let urgency dissolve. Even when there's pressure, Even when there's a deadline, move as if you have exactly the amount of time you need. Because rushing doesn't actually make you faster. It just makes you scattered. The world rushes. You don't. Not because you're slow, because you own your time. When you're unhurried, people assume you have power. And that assumption? It becomes reality. Power is magnetic. And you project it not through speed, but through its opposite. Trick 23. The Axiological Frame. Here's a question. What do you stand for? Not what do you like. Not what are your hobbies. But what are your values? Your non-negotiables? The internal principles that guide your decisions? Most people can't answer that question. They move through life reactively, making decisions based on what will be approved of, what will avoid conflict, what will get them ahead. But charismatic people? They operate from something deeper. An axiological frame, a value system that creates behavioral coherence. This is about consistency, not perfection, not rigidity, but consistency. When your behavior aligns with your values, when there's no gap between what you say you believe and how you act, something happens in other people's brains. Cognitive dissonance decreases. Trust increases. People feel they know who you are. They can predict you, not in a boring way, but in a secure way. And knowing someone is the first step to trusting them. Decide what you stand for. Honesty, then never lie. Even socially. Even when a white lie would be easier. Kindness, then be kind to everyone, not just the people who can do something for you. Courage, then speak the difficult truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The values themselves matter less than the consistency with which you live them. Decide what you stand for, then stand there. The consistency itself becomes charisma. People sense the bedrock beneath you. They feel that you're not shifting with every social breeze. And in a world where everyone is adapting, performing, trying to be liked, the person with a solid foundation, that person is magnetic. Trick 24. The Asymmetric Investment. Attention is currency. And like any currency, its value is determined by scarcity. If you give your attention to everyone equally, constantly, without discrimination, it loses value. Not because you're not kind, but because the human brain values what's rare. But here's the paradox. Withholding attention completely reads as coldness, as disinterest, as superiority. So what's the answer? Asymmetric investment. Give fully when you give. But no, you don't have to give to everyone, all the time. This is selectivity, not withholding. Discernment, not coldness. In a group setting, maybe there are 6 people. Instead of giving shallow attention to all 6 simultaneously, surface-level engagement, divided focus, choose one person. And for 5 minutes, give them everything. Your full presence. Your complete attention. Listen like they're the only person in the room. Then shift. Choose another person. Give them the same depth. What this creates is scarcity value. Your attention becomes precious because it's not always available. But when someone receives it, they receive it fully. They feel it. They remember it. People sense you're choosy about where you invest. And when you choose them, it matters. This isn't manipulation. It's honest resource management. You only have so much attention to give. When you spread it thin, everyone gets a little and no one gets enough. But when you concentrate it, people receive something real. Give fully when you give. Quality over quantity. And let there be times when you're not giving at all, when you're simply observing or thinking or resting. The asymmetry itself creates value. Trick 25. The Embodied Certainty. Language shapes reality. And one of the subtlest but most powerful ways it shapes reality is through certainty markers. Listen to how most people talk about their own experience. I think I felt uncomfortable. I guess I was frustrated. Maybe I'm upset about it. Hedging language. Uncertainty markers. And every I think, every maybe, every I guess dilutes the statement. It signals doubt. Not doubt about the external world. Doubt about your own internal experience. This is embodied certainty. And it's about reclaiming authority over your own inner world. The technique is simple. Stop saying, I think, when you're talking about your own feelings or experience. Say, I know. Not about facts. Not about objective reality. But about your subjective experience. Instead of, I think I felt uncomfortable, say, I felt uncomfortable. Instead of, maybe I'm frustrated, say, I'm frustrated. The shift seems small, but it's seismic. When you speak with linguistic certainty about your inner world, something activates in the brain, conviction circuits. You're modeling self-knowledge, self-trust, and that gives others permission to trust themselves too. Stop saying I think. Say I know. Not about facts, about your own experience. Certainty about your own inner world is magnetic. It says, I'm not confused about who I am or what I feel. I might not have all the answers, but I know myself. And in a world where everyone is second-guessing, where everyone is performing certainty on the outside while drowning in doubt on the inside, the person who genuinely knows themselves? That's rare. That's real. Trick 26. The energy conservation. Let's talk about silence again, but from a different angle. Social anxiety has a signature behavior, gap filling. When there's a lull in conversation, when no one's talking, when the energy drops, anxious people rush to fill it. They say something, anything, a joke, a comment, a question, just to keep things moving. But that rushing reveals something, neediness, a fear of emptiness, a belief that if you're not constantly contributing, you're not valuable. This is energy conservation, and it's about resisting that impulse, not filling every social silence or gap project's self-sufficiency. It signals low anxiety and high status. It says, I'm comfortable with emptiness. I don't need constant stimulation or validation. In a group conversation, there will be lulls, natural pauses, moments where no one's talking and the energy dips. Most people panic in those moments. They scramble to restart the conversation. But you let the quiet sit. You're comfortable there. You don't need to perform. You don't need to fill the room. And here's what happens. Someone else will break the silence. And when they do, you seem grounded, secure, unfazed by the emptiness. You don't need to fill the room. Let the room breathe. Emptiness is not absence, it's space. When you're comfortable with emptiness, people fill it with their attention. They look to you. They wonder what you're thinking. Your silence becomes more interesting than other people's words. This isn't about being withdrawn or cold. It's about being selective, about conserving your energy for moments that matter, and trusting that your value isn't determined by how much you contribute, but by the quality of your presence. Trick 27. The recency halo. Think about the last conversation you had, the one before you started listening to this. What do you remember most clearly? The beginning? The middle? Or the end? If you're like most people, you remember the ending. How it finished. The last thing they said. The way you parted. This is the recency effect. And it's not just a quirk. It's a fundamental feature of how your memory works. The hippocampus, that seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain responsible for encoding memories, has a peculiarity. Recent events are encoded more vividly than earlier ones. And endings, the final moments of an experience, create what psychologists call the emotional stamp, the summary judgment, the feeling you carry away. You could have a wonderful 2-hour conversation, deep, meaningful, connected. But if it ends poorly, if you're distracted during the goodbye, if you leave abruptly, if the last moment feels off, that ending colors the entire memory. Beginnings matter, but endings? They're what people carry home. This is the recency halo. And understanding it changes everything about how you exit interactions. Most people put their energy into the beginning, the entrance, the first impression. And that's important, we talked about that. But they let the ending be an afterthought, a rushed goodbye, a distracted wave as they're already thinking about the next thing. But what if you made the exit deliberate? What if you gave the goodbye the same attention you gave the hello? As you leave, make deliberate eye contact. Not long, just a moment. A genuine moment. Smile softly and say their name. Not loudly, just clearly, with warmth. It was good to see you, Sarah. That's the memory they'll keep, not the entire conversation. That moment, that eye contact, their name in your voice, the warmth in your smile. How you leave is more important than how you arrive. A strong exit echoes. It reverberates. It becomes the feeling they associate with you. Master the goodbye, and you master the memory. Trick 28. The name harmonic. Someone's name is the sweetest sound they know. You've probably heard that before. It's often quoted. Dale Carnegie made it famous. But what most people miss is this. It's only sweet when it's rare. Here's the neuroscience. When you hear your own name, the medial prefrontal cortex lights up. That's the region associated with self-reference, self-awareness, your sense of me. And when that region activates, there's a small dopamine release, a tiny reward, a moment of pleasure. But here's the key. Hearing your name triggers dopamine. Overusing it habituates the response. The brain stops responding. It becomes background noise. It loses power. This is the name harmonic, the strategic, sparing use of someone's name to maximize its impact. Say their name twice in a conversation. Once early, once when it matters most. The first time is the greeting, the anchor. Hey, Michael, good to see you. It establishes connection. It says, I know who you are. You matter enough that I remember your name. Then you don't use it again. For minutes, maybe for most of the conversation. You use you and eye contact. You're present, engaged, connected, but their name isn't spoken. Until the moment, the meaningful moment. Maybe you're saying something vulnerable. Maybe you're offering insight. Maybe you're saying goodbye. Michael, I really appreciate you sharing that. The name lands differently now. Because it's been absent. Because it's intentional. Because it arrives at a moment of significance. Their name becomes a gift you give rarely, making each use feel intentional. When everyone else is saying someone's name constantly. So, Jennifer, what I think, Jennifer, is that we should, Jennifer. You use it twice. And those 2 times, they matter more than everyone else's 20. Trick 29, the predictive empathy. There's a moment in every truly charismatic interaction that feels almost magical. It's when someone does something before you realize you need it. They hand you a napkin before you reach for one. They understand your point before you finish explaining it. They anticipate your need before you articulate it. This is predictive empathy, and it's rooted in something called theory of mind, your brain's ability to model other people's mental states. There's a region called the temporoparietal junction, or TPJ, that specializes in intention prediction. It's constantly running simulations. What are they thinking? What will they do next? What do they need? Most people aren't paying attention to these predictions. They're lost in their own thoughts, their own needs. But when you tune into the TPJ, when you actually pay attention to the subtle signals of what someone might need, and when you act on those predictions accurately, something powerful happens. You activate gratitude circuits in their brain. Deep gratitude. Because being anticipated feels like being known. And being known feels almost like being loved. Charisma is noticing what they need before they know they need it. This isn't mind reading. It's attention. Radical, precise attention. They reach for their glass of water, and you've already moved it 2 inches closer. Tiny, almost unnoticeable, but they feel it. They start to explain something complicated, and before they finish the setup, you nod and say, you mean the part about? And you've already understood. You're not just present, you're prescient, and that feels almost magical. The technique is simple. Watch, notice, predict, and occasionally, not constantly, but occasionally, act on the prediction before they ask. They'll remember you as the person who understood them. And understanding? That's the deepest form of charisma. Trick 30, the contrast principle. Here's a counterintuitive truth. Constant presence makes you forgettable. Constant availability makes you background noise. The human brain doesn't perceive absolutes. It perceives change. This is Weber's law, one of the foundational principles of perception. You don't notice the humming of the refrigerator until it stops. You don't notice the warmth of the sun until you step into shade. Contrast creates salience. Change creates attention. This is the contrast principle. And in the context of charisma, it means varying your intensity of presence. When you're present, be fully present. High engagement, deep focus, complete attention. But then, strategically, deliberately, withdraw. Not coldly, not to punish, but to create space, to create variation. In a long interaction, a dinner, a party, a work event, have moments of deep focus. You're leaning in, listening intently, fully engaged. Then, naturally look away. Think. Let your attention turn inward for a moment. Then return. That rhythm, presence, withdrawal, presence, creates perceptual contrast. When you return, your presence feels more valuable because it was briefly absent. Don't be always available. Be unforgettable when you are. This applies across timescales too. Don't text back immediately every time. Not to play games, but to live your life. Be genuinely engaged elsewhere. And when you do respond, be present. Be thoughtful. The contrast itself creates value. When you're there, you're fully there. When you're not, they miss you. And missing someone is the beginning of wanting them. Constant presence habituates. Variation captivates. Trick 31. The contextual memory anchor. Memory doesn't live in words alone. It lives in senses, in context, in the unique details that make an experience embodied. Your hippocampus, that same structure we talked about earlier, it doesn't just store what happened. It binds context to memory. The smell of the room, the specific phrase someone used, the gesture they made while talking. And when those contextual elements are unique, when they're specific to you, you become unforgettable. This is the contextual memory anchor, the deliberate creation of unique sensory associations that become linked to your presence. Be the person with a detail, a specific phrase, a gesture no one else uses. Make yourself a memory. Maybe it's a phrase, something simple that you say consistently in your specific way. Isn't that interesting? But the way you say it, the tone, the slight pause before interesting, that's yours. No one else says it quite like that. Or maybe it's a gesture, the way you touch your chin when you're thinking, the way you tilt your head when you're really listening. Something consistent, something uniquely you. Or maybe it's something sensory, a specific cologne or perfume, not overwhelming, but present. A consistent choice in what you wear. The same leather jacket, the same silver ring. These aren't affectations. They're not performances. They're signatures, and the brain encodes them. Weeks later, someone smells that scent, or hears that phrase in someone else's voice, or sees a similar gesture, and they think of you. You're not just intellectually remembered. You're sensorially remembered. You're embodied in their memory. Use one unique phrase consistently. Deliver it your way. It becomes your signature. And signatures? They're unforgettable. Trick 32. The positive assumption bias. Here's a simple but profound technique that changes the entire energy of your interactions. Assume positive intent. Always. When someone's behavior is ambiguous, when they're curt in an email, when they forget to respond, when they seem distant, you have a choice. You can assume the worst. They're angry, they're dismissive, they don't care. Or you can assume the best. They're busy, they're distracted, they're dealing with something. This is the positive assumption bias. And it's based on something called attributional charity, the decision to give people the benefit of the doubt. Here's why it's powerful. The brain mirrors emotional expectations. When you approach someone assuming they're hostile or cold, your body language shifts. Your tone changes. Your energy becomes defensive, and they pick up on that. And often, they mirror it back. But when you approach someone assuming they're kind, assuming they meant well, assuming the best, your energy is warm, open, generous. And people mirror that too. Assume they meant well, even when you're not sure. The assumption itself changes reality. Someone sends you a short, curt message. It could be read as rude. Instead of getting defensive, you respond warmly, assuming they were just busy or distracted. No worries. I know you've got a lot going on. And what often happens? Their next message is warmer. Apologetic, even. They match the energy you gave them. When you treat people as if they're already kind, they often become so. Not because you're naive, but because your assumption creates the conditions for kindness to emerge. This isn't about being a doormat. If someone is genuinely unkind, repeatedly, you can recognize that. But in ambiguous situations, which is most situations, assume the best. Your generosity of interpretation will be felt, and it will be returned. Trick 33. The effort heuristic. Grand gestures are impressive, but small, specific ones? They're unforgettable. This is the effort heuristic, and it's based on a simple principle. The brain doesn't value effort alone. It values personalized effort. Effort that signals individual attention. You could buy someone an expensive gift, something generic, something anyone could buy, and they'll appreciate it. But it won't stick. It won't create the depth of gratitude you might expect. But if you remember a tiny detail they mentioned 3 weeks ago, their favorite childhood candy, a book they wanted to read, a small problem they were dealing with, and you reference it, or address it, or solve it. That's different. That's not about the money or the scale. That's about the attention. And the brain values attention above almost everything else. Remember a tiny detail they mentioned weeks ago. Reference it. That remembering is the gift. Hey, did you ever finish that project you were stressed about? They mentioned it once, in passing, a month ago, and you remembered. You're not just making conversation. You're demonstrating that they occupy your mental space, that they matter enough to be remembered. Small, personalized efforts activate the principle of reciprocity more powerfully than grand, impersonal gestures. Because personalization signals, I see you, specifically you, not just anyone. And being seen specifically, that's what everyone wants. Trick 34, the self-disclosure gradient. Vulnerability builds intimacy. Everyone knows this. But what most people miss is the timing, the pacing, the gradient. This is based on social penetration theory, the idea that relationships deepen in layers, like peeling an onion. Surface layer first, then gradually, over time, deeper layers. Skipping steps doesn't accelerate intimacy. It triggers distrust. When you reveal too much too soon, when you share deep trauma or profound vulnerability on a first meeting, the brain doesn't interpret it as openness. It interprets it as poor boundaries, as emotional instability. But when you reveal yourself gradually, matching the pace of the relationship, trust builds naturally. This is the self-disclosure gradient, the intentional, gradual increase of vulnerability over time. Don't open the whole door at once. Open it inch by inch and let them walk through with you. First meeting, share a surface preference. I'm terrible at mornings. Something light, relatable, human but not heavy. Third meeting, share a mild struggle. I've been finding it hard to stay motivated lately. A bit deeper, still manageable, but more real. 10th meeting, share something truly vulnerable. Something that matters. Something that costs you to say. This pacing does two things. First, it allows trust to build at a natural rate. Second, it invites reciprocal disclosure. When you share at their level, they feel safe sharing at that level too. And gradually, together, you go deeper. You reveal yourself at the pace that feels safe, inviting them to do the same. Intimacy isn't a leap. It's a walk. And you're walking together, step by step, into depth. Trick 35, the third-party validation. Here's something fascinating. People trust compliments they overhear more than compliments they receive directly. Why? Because direct praise activates skepticism. When someone compliments you to your face, part of your brain wonders, are they just being nice? Do they want something? Are they being honest? But when you overhear someone praising you, when a mutual friend tells you, hey, Alex was saying such nice things about you the other day, that skepticism disappears. Because why would they lie to someone else about you? What would they gain? This is third-party validation, and it's one of the most powerful techniques for building genuine, lasting rapport. Praise them to someone else. Sincerely. It always finds its way back, and when it does, it means everything. You're talking to a mutual friend, and genuinely, authentically, you say, Sarah is one of the most thoughtful people I know. The way she remembers details about people, it's remarkable. You're not saying it to manipulate. You're saying it because you mean it. And you're saying it to someone else, not to Sarah herself. But here's what happens. It gets back to her. Someone mentions it. Oh, by the way, I was talking to Alex, and they said the nicest thing about you. And when Sarah hears it, she believes it. Completely. Because it wasn't performed for her benefit. It was genuine. Unprompted. Real. You become the person who says kind things when no one's watching. And that's rare. That's character. And people remember character more than they remember charm. Trick 36, the gravitational lean. There's a moment in every meaningful conversation when something shifts. When someone stops making small talk and says something real, something vulnerable, something that matters. And in that moment, your body should respond before your words do. This is the gravitational lean. The science of personal space, proxemics, tells us that humans interpret forward lean as interest, as investment. But the angle matters. Too much, and you invade their space. You trigger threat signals. Too little, and they don't feel it. The sweet spot is 15 to 20 degrees. A subtle shift forward. Not lunging, not invading, just moving toward them. Like gravity is pulling you closer. When they say something real, your body should respond before your words do. Lean in, just an inch. Here's what this communicates. This matters. What you're saying right now, I'm not just hearing it. I'm receiving it. I'm present for it. And here's the beautiful thing about the lean. It's contagious. When you lean in, often they lean in too. The space between you closes. Not uncomfortably, but intimately. And suddenly the conversation isn't happening across a distance. It's happening in a shared space. Mid-conversation, they share something vulnerable. Maybe about a fear, a loss, a hope they're afraid to name. And instead of sitting back, instead of maintaining your neutral position, you lean forward slightly. Elbows on your knees if you're sitting. Weight shifting forward if you're standing. It's a physical response to emotional content. And they feel it. Maybe not consciously, but their nervous system registers. This person is with me. In this moment. Fully. The lean says, this matters. And when something matters to you, it starts to matter to them. Trick 37. The tactile microdose. Touch is powerful. Dangerously powerful. Which is why most people either avoid it entirely or use it thoughtlessly. But there's a middle way. A careful, deliberate use of touch that collapses social distance faster than any words. This is the tactile microdose. Under your skin, you have specialized nerve fibers called C-tactile afferents. They respond specifically to gentle, slow touch, the kind of touch associated with caregiving and social bonding. When these fibers are activated, they send signals directly to the brain's social bonding circuits. Oxytocin gets released, the hormone of trust, of connection. But, and this is crucial, touch must be brief, appropriate, and rare. 1 to 2 seconds. On neutral zones, the forearm, the shoulder, the upper back. Never anywhere that could be misinterpreted. And never frequently. If you're touching someone every few minutes, it loses all power. It becomes noise. Touch is a language. But use it like punctuation, rarely, and only where it matters. The most powerful moment for touch? The goodbye. As you're leaving, as you're saying farewell, a light touch on the forearm. Just a moment. A gentle pressure. Warm. Then released. That touch lingers. Not physically, it's over in a second. But in memory. Days later, they'll remember how it felt to talk to you. And part of what they'll remember, without consciously knowing it, is that moment of connection. That brief collapse of social distance. Touch, when rare and respectful, collapses social distance faster than any words. But the key word is rare. Use it once per interaction, maybe twice if the interaction is long and the moment is right. Any more, and it becomes manipulation. Any less, and you miss the opportunity. One touch, chosen carefully, placed precisely, remembered forever. Trick 38. The ocular disengagement. We've talked about eye contact, how powerful it is, how it signals attention and confidence. But here's what most people miss. Constant eye contact isn't powerful. It's intense. And intensity, when unbroken, becomes pressure. This is the ocular disengagement, the strategic breaking of eye contact to prevent arousal overload. When you maintain unbroken eye contact, you're activating arousal systems in the other person's brain. Not necessarily sexual arousal, just heightened physiological activation. The amygdala lights up. Heart rate increases slightly. It's stimulating. But too much stimulation becomes stress. The rhythm of gaze, engage, disengage, engage. That's what creates connection without pressure. That's the dance. Don't stare. Look, then think, then look again. Let your eyes breathe. The technique is subtle. They finish making a point. You hold their gaze for 2 seconds. Full presence. Full attention. Then you look away, not nervously, not dismissively, but thoughtfully. Down and to the side, maybe, or away into the middle distance. Like you're processing what they said, thinking about it. Then you return. Eye contact restored. And the cycle continues. This rhythm does 2 things. First, it prevents the intensity from becoming uncomfortable. Second, it signals that you're actually thinking about what they're saying. You're not just staring at them. You're engaging with their ideas. Look, then think, then look again. Natural rhythm. Like breathing. Like the tide. Constant staring is pressure. Rhythmic engagement is connection. Know the difference. Trick 39. The postural asymmetry. Perfect posture, shoulders back, spine straight, everything aligned. It looks impressive in a photograph. But in person, it reads as tension, as rigidity, as someone performing confidence rather than embodying it. Real ease, real comfort, has asymmetry. This is the postural asymmetry technique. When your posture is perfectly symmetrical, when both shoulders are at the same height, when your weight is evenly distributed, the brain reads it as military bearing, as formality, as guardedness. But when there's slight asymmetry, one shoulder slightly forward, weight shifted onto one leg, head tilted ever so slightly, the brain reads it as relaxation, as approachability, as someone who's comfortable in their own body. And comfort is contagious. When you appear comfortable, others relax around you. Don't stand like a soldier. Stand like a tree, rooted but relaxed. Shift your weight onto one leg. Not dramatically, not slouching, just a subtle shift. Let one shoulder drop slightly. Let your head tilt a few degrees to one side when you're listening. You're still present, still attentive, but not rigid, not performing, just there, comfortable in your own skin. This is one of those techniques that sounds too simple to matter. But watch people. Watch who you're drawn to. It's rarely the person standing at perfect attention. It's the person who looks like they belong in their body, who isn't fighting gravity or performing posture. Asymmetry signals ease, and ease is deeply attractive because it's so rare. Trick 40. The conversational punctuation. Words have weight when they're given time to land, but most people speak like they're afraid of silence. One word tumbles into the next, sentences rushing forward, barely a breath between thoughts. But what if you punctuated your speech? What if you put frames around your words? This is conversational punctuation, the deliberate use of pause to create semantic weight. When someone asks you a question and you answer immediately, no pause, no breath, your response feels reflexive, automatic, like you weren't really thinking about it. But when there's a pause, 2-3 seconds of deliberate silence, the answer that follows feels considered, thoughtful, wise even. Pause length signals processing depth. The brain interprets it as, this person is actually thinking about what I asked. They're taking me seriously. A pause before you speak is a frame around your words. It says, this matters. They ask you a question. Anything. What do you think about this? How have you been? What would you do? Instead of answering immediately, breathe. Actually breathe. Let the question sit in the air for a moment. 2 seconds. 3. Then answer. The pause does something to the listener. It creates anticipation. It signals that what's coming matters. It draws them in. And when your words finally arrive, they land heavier. They feel more true, more considered, more real. The delay is the delivery. The pause is half the message. Trick 41. The micro-nod sequence. We've talked about nodding before, but there's a specific rhythm to nodding that creates something almost hypnotic, something that entrains attention. This is the micro-nod sequence. Instead of one large nod, the kind that says yes definitively, use 3 small nods. Sequential, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The reason this works is neurological. The brain loves patterns of 3. The rule of 3 isn't just a writing technique. It's how the brain processes rhythm. 1 nod is acknowledgement. 2 nods start a pattern. 3 nods complete it. It's satisfying, neurologically satisfying. When they speak, nod 3 times. Small, slow, like you're saying yes to their words 3 times over. They make a point, maybe about something they believe or something they experienced. And instead of 1 big nod, you give them 3 small ones. Once, twice, 3 times. Then stillness. What this creates is a rhythmic feedback loop. Your nods punctuate their speech. They feel it. It's like you're beating time to their words. I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. And then the stillness after the 3rd nod, that's the seal. That's the period at the end of the sentence. It says, received, understood, complete. The nods say, I'm with you. But in rhythm, not performance. It's subtle, almost subliminal, but powerful. Trick 42. The spatial calibration. Personal space isn't fixed. It changes based on context, relationship, and topic. And charismatic people understand this intuitively. They calibrate their distance without thinking. This is spatial calibration, and it's based on Edward Hall's work on proxemics, the study of personal space. Hall identified different zones: intimate distance, 0 to 18 inches, personal distance, 18 inches to 4 feet, social distance, 4 to 12 feet, and public distance, 12 plus feet. And here's the key. The zone you occupy should match the content of the conversation and the context of the environment. In a loud place, a bar, a party, a crowded room, stepping closer is expected. The noise justifies it. You need to be closer to hear each other. But in quiet intimacy, a living room, a late-night conversation, a moment of vulnerability, give space. Let there be breathing room. Read the room. And by room, I mean the inches between you. Adjust without thinking. When the topic goes deep, when they share something personal, you might lean in slightly, but you don't necessarily move physically closer. You respect the space. You let the intimacy be emotional, not just physical. But if you're in a casual, loud environment and you're staying far away, you create distance that feels cold, disconnected. The technique is to let the context guide your body. Don't think about it consciously. Just notice the environment, notice the energy, notice what they're sharing, and let your body find the right distance. When you intuitively respect their space, they feel safe. And safety is the foundation of all connection. Trick 43. The hand geography. Your hands tell a story, and when they're hidden, that story becomes suspicious. This is hand geography, the strategic placement of your hands to signal openness and reduce subconscious threat. There's an evolutionary reason hidden hands make people uncomfortable. For hundreds of thousands of years, hidden hands could mean concealed weapons, concealed threats. The brain still carries that wiring. When someone's hands are in their pockets, behind their back, or under a table, a tiny part of the observer's brain registers potential threat. But when hands are visible, relaxed, and positioned between waist and chest, the most non-threatening zone, that threat signal never activates. Instead, there's a subtle sense of safety. Openness. Let them see your hands. Not in display, in rest. It's a subtle signal. You're safe with me. Hands on the table when you're sitting, loosely clasped or resting naturally. Not fidgeting, not ringing. Just there. Visible. Calm. When standing, hands at your sides or loosely in front of you. Not crossed, not in pockets, not behind your back. Just visible. This isn't about being performative. It's about removing a subtle barrier. When your hands are visible and relaxed, people's nervous systems register openness. Nothing hidden, nothing to fear. Visible. Calm hands say, I have nothing to hide. And openness invites openness. When you're open, they can be open. When you're safe, they feel safe. It's one of the smallest adjustments you can make, but its impact runs deep into the ancient brain, the part that decides, in milliseconds, whether someone is safe. Be safe. Let them see it. Trick 44. The exit alignment. Your feet tell the truth. Even when your face is lying, even when your words are polite, your feet reveal where you actually want to be. This is exit alignment. And it's about understanding that body orientation, the direction your shoulders, hips, and especially your feet are pointing, is read subconsciously as a signal of attention and intention. Research shows that even a 20-degree misalignment is detected by the observer's brain, not consciously, but their nervous system registers it, and it reads as disinterest, as partial presence, as this person is already leaving. When every part of you faces them, they feel it. Attention is a physical force. Most people do this wrong. They're in a conversation, but their body is angled toward the door, or toward another person, or toward the rest of the room. Their face might be turned toward the speaker, but their shoulders, their hips, their feet, they're pointing elsewhere. And the speaker feels it, not consciously, but they feel partially attended to, partially valued. The technique is simple but requires discipline. Physically align your entire body toward whoever is speaking, shoulders square to them, hips facing them, And most importantly, feet pointing directly at them. Your feet tell the truth. Point them toward the person you're with. Everything else follows. Even in a group setting, when someone is speaking, angle your body fully toward them. Not just your head, your whole body. They'll feel the shift. They'll feel the weight of your full attention. And in a world where everyone is partially present, where everyone's attention is divided, where everyone is monitoring their phone and scanning the room, the person who turns their entire body toward you, that person feels like a gift. Full alignment, full presence, full attention. That's the nonverbal foundation of charisma. Trick 45, the downward inflection. Listen to how most people end their sentences. Even when they're making statements, even when they're expressing opinions or sharing facts, their voice rises at the end. Like a question, I think we should go. Hear that? The upward lilt? That rising pitch that turns a statement into an inquiry? This is called upspeak, and it signals uncertainty. It signals that you're seeking approval, asking permission, unsure of your own words. But here's what happens when you do the opposite. When you let your voice drop at the end of sentences. This is the downward inflection, and it's one of the most powerful vocal techniques you can master. Rising inflection signals questions, uncertainty, seeking. Falling pitch signals statements, completion, certainty. The brain interprets this automatically, before conscious thought. When your voice falls at the end of a sentence, the words land differently. They sound like truths, like declarations, like someone who knows what they're saying and isn't asking for permission to say it. Let your voice drop at the end of sentences. Not harshly, just settled. Like a period, not a question mark. I think we should go. Hear the difference? The pitch drops on go. It settles. It completes. It doesn't seek approval. It simply is. This doesn't mean being aggressive or domineering. You can be gentle and still use downward inflection. You can be kind and still let your voice settle at the end of your thoughts. The technique is simple. As you approach the end of a sentence, let your pitch drop by about 3 to 5 notes. Not dramatically, not into a growl, just a gentle descent, like a plane landing. Smooth, controlled, complete. Your words sound like truths, not inquiries. And certainty? Certainty is magnetic. Not because it's always right, but because it's grounded. And people are drawn to groundedness in a world of questions. Trick 46, the prosodic contrast. Monotone voices are invisible. Your brain has a system, the reticular activating system, or RAS, that filters out repetitive, unchanging stimuli. It's why you stop hearing the hum of the refrigerator, why you stop noticing the feeling of clothes on your skin. And it's why monotone voices fade into background noise. But variation? Variation signals importance. Novelty. Something worth paying attention to. This is prosodic contrast. The intentional variation of volume, pace, and pitch to activate sustained attention. Most people speak in a relatively flat dynamic range. Same volume, same speed, same pitch, and their listeners drift. Not because the content is boring, but because the delivery creates no reason to stay engaged. But when your voice has texture, when it moves, when it has weather, people follow it. They have to, because the variation keeps the RES engaged. It keeps signaling, this is important. Pay attention. Speak in textures. Soft, then strong. Fast, then slow. Let your voice have weather. Here's how this works in practice. You're telling a story or making a point. Most of it, you speak at normal volume and pace. But when you reach a key moment, the insight, the twist, the truth, you slow down. And you drop your volume. Not to a whisper, necessarily. Just quieter. Softer. So they have to lean in slightly to hear. What this does is create a perceptual contrast. The quiet moment after the normal volume makes them pay attention differently. They engage more actively. They lean in physically and mentally. Or you can do the opposite. Soft for most of the thought, then one word, one specific word, with more volume, more emphasis. It punctuates. It creates a moment of impact. The key is variation. Your voice should never be predictable. It should have dynamics, crescendos and decrescendos, fast passages and slow ones. When your voice moves, people follow it. Monotony is invisible. Dynamics are captivating. Trick 47, the silence breath. Here's something most people never consider. The sound of your breathing is part of your communication. Not heavy breathing, not gasping, but the soft, audible sound of a deliberate breath. The kind you take after completing a thought. The kind that signals, I'm calm. We have time. There's no rush. This is the silence breath. Mirror neurons. Those remarkable cells that fire both when we act and when we observe others acting. They pick up on breathing patterns. When you breathe calmly, visibly, audibly, the people around you unconsciously begin to match your rhythm. This is called physiological synchrony. Your calm becomes their calm. Your breath becomes a model for theirs. And when breathing synchronizes, everything else deepens. Rapport, connection, trust, because you're literally in rhythm with each other. Let them hear you breathe. Not loudly, just present. It says, there's time. We're not rushing. After you finish a thought, before you continue, take a breath. A real one, audible enough that they can hear it. Let them see your chest rise. Let them watch you fill your lungs. Then, after that brief moment, continue. What this does is give them permission to breathe too. Most people hold their breath slightly when they're nervous or engaged. But when you breathe visibly, calmly, they remember to breathe. And when they breathe, they relax. Your breath becomes the invisible bridge between your nervous system and theirs. This is especially powerful in tense moments. When someone is agitated, when the conversation is difficult, when the energy is high, your calm, audible breathing becomes an anchor. It says, I'm not rattled. I'm here. I'm steady. And steadiness is contagious. Trick 48. The vocal fry avoidance. There's a sound that's become increasingly common, especially in certain demographics. It's called vocal fry, that creaky, crackling quality that happens at the end of sentences when the voice drops too low and loses air support. It sounds like this. I know what you meant. That crackling, popping sound at the end. And here's what it signals: low energy, lack of commitment, submissiveness. Vocal fry happens when airflow decreases, but you keep trying to speak. The vocal cords don't vibrate cleanly. They flutter irregularly. And the sound reads as weakness, as someone running out of steam. This is vocal fry avoidance. The practice of supporting your voice all the way through to the end of each sentence. A clean, supported tone projects energy and completion. It feels strong without being loud. And strength is charismatic. Support your voice all the way to the end of each sentence. Don't let it fizzle. Let it land. The technique is about breath support. As you approach the end of a sentence, instead of letting your air run out, push a little more breath through. Keep the airflow consistent. Let the final word be just as supported as the first. Practice this with simple sentences. That's exactly what I mean. Feel how easy it is to let mean crackle into vocal fry? Now say it again, but push breath through that final word. That's exactly what I mean. Clean, complete, landed. The difference is subtle but significant. When every sentence ends cleanly, when your voice never fizzles or crackles, you project sustained energy. Commitment. Follow through. Your voice says, I finish what I start. Even my sentences. Trick 49. The strategic whisper. Loudness demands attention, but so does quietness. In fact, sometimes quietness demands more. This is the strategic whisper. The deliberate dropping of your voice to just above a whisper for key phrases. Here's why this is powerful. When you whisper, the listener has to work slightly to hear you. That effort, that slight strain, increases memory encoding. The brain pays more attention to information it has to work for, and that information is perceived as more important. Effortful listening creates perceived importance. But there's another layer. Whispering collapses social distance. It creates intimacy, because whispers are for secrets, for closeness, for things that matter. When you whisper, the world leans in. And leaning in is intimacy. Most of your speech should be at normal volume. Clear, audible, easy to hear. But occasionally, maybe once or twice in an important conversation, you drop to just above a whisper for one sentence. One key phrase. Mid-conversation, you've been speaking normally. Then you reach the insight, the truth, the thing that really matters. And your voice drops. Soft, close, almost like you're sharing a secret. And here's what I realized. Watch what happens. Their eyes sharpen. They lean forward. Their entire body orients toward you because they don't want to miss what comes next. The whisper forces active listening. It eliminates passive reception. They can't drift and still hear you. They have to engage. When you need them to really hear you, get quieter. Not silent, just close. But use this sparingly. Once per conversation, maybe twice if it's a long one. Any more and it loses its power. It becomes a trick they can detect. But used rarely, at the exact right moment, it's magnetic. Trick 50, the tempo modulation. Speed conveys excitement, energy, enthusiasm, but it also conveys superficiality, lack of depth. When someone speaks quickly, the brain interprets it as either nervousness or shallowness. But slowness? Slowness conveys gravitas, seriousness, weight. This is tempo modulation, the intentional slowing of your speech during important moments. Most people speak at around 150 words per minute in casual conversation. That's fine for most content, for stories, for lightness, for energy. But when you reach something important, a key insight, a profound truth, a moment that matters, slow down. 10 to 15% slower. Drop to about 120 to 130 words per minute. When it matters, slow down. Not to a crawl, just enough that each word has weight. The shift doesn't need to be dramatic. You're not suddenly speaking in slow motion. You're just giving each word a little more time, a little more space, letting each syllable complete before moving to the next. What this does is create emphasis without volume. You're not shouting. You're not being dramatic. You're just slowing. And that slowness makes every word feel more deliberate, more intentional, more true. The brain associates speed with excitement and superficiality. It associates slowness with depth and importance. Use this association strategically. Normal pace for most content. Slower pace for key moments. Slow words feel heavy, and heavy words are remembered. Trick 51, the resonance anchor. Where does your voice come from? Most people speak from their throat. The voice is thin, pinched, high. It lacks depth, lacks warmth. But there's another place to speak from. Your chest. This is the resonance anchor. Speaking from chest voice rather than throat voice. Low-frequency sounds, the kind produced when you speak from your chest, activate the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the system responsible for calm, for rest, for trust. High-frequency sounds, by contrast, can activate stress responses. A resonant, chest-centered voice feels grounded, warm, authoritative without being aggressive. And people follow grounded voices. Speak from your chest, not your throat. Let your voice rumble up, not squeeze out. Here's how to find it. Before speaking, hum. A low hum. Feel where the vibration is. If it's all in your throat, that's throat voice. But if you can feel vibration in your chest, if you can place your hand on your sternum and feel it rumbling, that's chest voice. Hum until you find that chest resonance. Feel it vibrating in your ribcage. Then speak from that same place. Let the voice originate there, in that deep place, and then travel up and out. The difference is profound. Chest voice sounds fuller, richer, more grounded. It has body, literal body. And when you speak from your chest, people feel it. Not just hear it, feel it. The low frequencies travel through air and create a physical sensation. Your voice becomes a presence, not just a sound. Before an important conversation, hum. Find your chest voice. Then speak from there. A resonant voice feels grounded. And people follow grounded voices. Trick 52, the articulation precision. Finally, let's talk about clarity. About crispness. About the difference between mumbling and precision. When you speak clearly, when you enunciate fully, when each consonant is crisp and complete, you reduce cognitive load for the listener. They don't have to work to understand you, which means their mental resources are freed up for connection, for feeling, for engagement. This is articulation precision, the practice of completing each sound, especially consonants. Consonants are the architecture of speech. Vowels carry the emotion, but consonants carry the meaning. When consonants are swallowed or mumbled, when the T at the end of important disappears, when the D in told softens into nothing, comprehension requires more effort. But when consonants are crisp, when the T is a true T, when the K is sharp, when the D is definite, understanding is effortless. And effortlessness feels like competence, like intelligence, like someone who knows what they're saying and how to say it. Don't mumble. Don't swallow your words. Let each sound be complete. Practice with specific words. Exactly. Say it with a soft T at the end, and it loses impact. Say it with a crisp, clear T, exactly, and the word has precision. It has finality. Important. With a mumbled ending, it fades. With a clean T at the end, important T, it completes. The words but, that, what, not. Most people drop the final T. But when you keep it, when you let that consonant land cleanly, your speech gains definition, clarity, authority. People understand you effortlessly. And effortlessness feels like competence. This doesn't mean being over-precise to the point of sounding robotic. You're not clipping every word into staccato bursts. You're just completing each sound, letting the consonants do their job. Precision matters. In thought, yes, but also in sound. Conclusion. And there you have it. 52 psychology tricks that can transform you into someone effortlessly charismatic. But here's the truth that matters most. Charisma isn't about performing. It's not about memorizing techniques and deploying them like weapons. It's about presence. It's about making people feel seen, heard, and valued in a world that constantly rushes past them. You don't need to use all 52 of these techniques. Start with one. Maybe it's the threshold effect, pausing before you enter a room to reset your nervous system. Maybe it's the semantic echo, repeating someone's last few words to show you're truly listening. Maybe it's simply learning to breathe audibly, to slow down, to let silence exist without rushing to fill it. Pick one technique that resonates with you and practice it until it becomes second nature. Then add another, then another. Because here's what I've learned, charisma compounds. Each small shift in how you show up creates ripples. The way you hold eye contact changes how people trust you. The way you pause before speaking changes how your words land. The way you lean in during vulnerable moments changes how deeply people connect with you. These aren't tricks. They're the language of genuine human connection, and you're learning to speak it fluently. If this video added value to your life, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're building a community of people who understand that personal growth isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more fully yourself, more present, more intentional, more real. Drop a comment and tell me, which technique are you going to try first? I read every single comment, and I'm genuinely curious which of these 52 resonated most with you. And remember, the greatest version of yourself isn't someone you have to become. It's someone you already are, just waiting to be revealed. These techniques, they're just removing the static, clearing the noise, so that authentic you can finally be heard. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, go practice being unforgettable.